also think your book is a lot about the art of change and like how do we actually work with our body and our brain and now our soul's expression. How do we work with the change of that? So that's kind of where I tied, and like the vocal cords and the cervix, fascinating that, women who have been raped or sexually abused lose their voice. And vice versa. If you damage the thyroid, there's a lot of belief that the thyroid is injured and it's like you're not actually speaking your voice. So I think all of those are connected. But where I'd like to go with this conversation is, if we have this intuition that is emerging as we go into menopause, how do you navigate when your body and your soul is screaming at you to live life differently, to show up differently? How do we have like a recipe or a formula on how we navigate that moment? Because I can tell you it's terrifying.
So I think the first thing to do is to make sure you're coming back to the body and being conscious with the body, right?
Oh, I love
that. If you're feeling rage, if you're feeling grief, whatever the emotion is, find ways to express it. Now, I know you can work out. I'm not saying working out isn't good. The type of expression I'm talking about is more feminine. So like putting on, I've got an artist that I love called Sia. I don't know if you know her. She is able to express so many multi layers of emotion. If I'm feeling something that I'm unable to process, I'll put her music on, and just for 3 minutes or even 2 songs, I'll try and move it out of my body. Because what happens if something's rising within you and it's scaring you as well, you're kind of going to push it back down. You're going to push it back down, which is obviously going to affect your health. It's going to affect your anxiety too. And so it's like, we have not been taught to be moved by the feminine soul. Right? We have not been taught how to. Marion Woodman, who is, I'm sure you're aware of her work, she's passed now. She was a Jungian analyst and just epic teacher. She spoke about the marriage of the feminine soul and the body and how imperative it is, particularly for the conscious feminine. And she spoke a lot about the crowning of the elder as well.
Oh, yeah.
And how in our society, we don't have many elders. We don't have many true elder grandmothers, which has nothing to do with whether you've birthed children yourself. It's about, and I think this is because we have been starved of these feminine rites of passage being ceremonially or at least consciously acknowledge these initiations. An initiation means to cross a threshold, to be not who you once were. And also, in order to cross the threshold, you have to face that I don't know who I'm becoming. I don't know who I will one day soon be. In my shamanic training, we were taught that the purpose of life, if you really, really want to live fully, consciously, is to learn to die while still fully living.
Wow.
And on your deathbed, whether you know it's coming or not, to actually die young. And you die young because you've allowed yourself to die over and over and over again and be reborn over and over and over again. And I really believe, like, having experienced so much stuff with my health as well, like chronic illness and many, many things, I really, really, really believe that us not living in congruence with the soul, us resisting what is dying within us, is us resisting nature, which is us resisting life. And so you're actually saying no to life and yes to death, but not rebirth, Wow. And so slowly we contract.
Yeah. Yeah, and the statistics on autoimmune conditions for women, like 80% of autoimmune challenges happen to women. And there's a lot of physiological explanations for that. But it's also an autoimmune condition is a turning on the body is attacking itself. And so I was thinking as you were talking about if what I would love to see is a world where menopause is looked at like an initiation. It is looked at like not just your estrogen is going away and progesterone, you are actually this older version of you is going away, and that there would be some kind of ceremony that would actually allow for an initiation process to begin. But and part of my concern right now with the menopause conversation is it's become all about estrogen and patches and creams. And I'm over here thinking, no, this is a dying and a rebirth. Yet we don't have a culture that allows us to change. We fear change. We want everybody to stay the same. I can tell you for my own self, like as I've changed, it's been hard on those people around me because they've been like, wait, I felt good with a certain way that you were, and you're now showing up a different way. So when we look at that initiation, is there a way that we can, you and I have talked about this, is there a way we can start to talk about it publicly with the people we love? Like this old version of me is dying and this new version is coming forward. Is there a way to actually share that with those people close to you that you have found successful?
Yeah, I think the thing, first of all, I so love this conversation because I totally believe where we avoid change and just as we avoid talking about death, even birth. If you look at birth, it's all about like the delivery of the baby. It's not about the transformation of the mother,
Yes.
It's not about the fact that like women have been doing this since the first baby existed,
Yes.
Anyway, don't get me started on that one. Or maybe that's another conversation.
Or maybe get me started.
But anyway, I digress. So okay. The thing about change is that I think it's because we've disconnected ourselves so much from nature. Like you look up nature in the dictionary, it literally says stones, plants, animals, but not humans. Like it says that we are not nature, but we are. And we know when we look at the seasons and all Indigenous traditions, and even if we don't have Indigenous traditions that are alive now because they've been snubbed out, we all have them in our ancestry. We all have them. And I think that we are desperate, hungry, starving for that. Yes. And I think it's our belief that nature is separate to us that makes it okay for us to conquer it or to see it as this like evil force,
Yeah.
But it's actually in us recognizing that we are nature, and like nature, we are ever changing. That I think that healing can happen. So that's like a bigger conversation. How that relates to us in our day-to-day life is that when you're in a relationship, right, and you know that you're changing or that other person is changing, it can feel like it's a personal thing versus like spring going into summer, going into autumn, going into winter. It's just nature. It is part of our true nature, and we are no different. We are not meant to stay the same. And so I think the more open, the more we can understand, and this is why your book is going to be so needed. It's so needed. Giving people a vernacular to be able to talk about it. And I think that this conversation is coming back to us. And so it can be a little bit more normal. So that's already happening. But I think navigating where you are in that map. So you're making the map and then people saying, oh, wow, I just learnt this. So bringing people along in the journey. So I know that like people pleasing is a big one. And even myself, I'm an older mother. So I'm perimenopause and so that self-sacrificing urge that I had in my 20s and my 30s, which I actually devoted to my work, doesn't exist. And so I was feeling so guilty that, oh, why are all the other younger mums able to just like give and give and give? And I definitely have a lit. Is it because I work? What is it? No. And so then having that language, which I'll say, talk to my husband or talk to my friends or my mom or whatever, and just say, oh, I'm finding this difficult to navigate because I know being perimenopausal, I'm actually right on track. And I'm feeling guilty. Same thing if you are a people-pleasing person who's always been, you know, I'll drop everything at the drop of a hat just to help whoever wants me to. You could bring it into the conversation of, so you're not distancing, you're not making it personal. And you're saying, my gosh, I'm really changing and there's something that I'm working on, which is not being such a people pleaser. You don't have to say it in the moment that you let them down, but you're bringing them along the journey with you. And then, you know, not all relationships are meant to stay as they are forever as well. And, you know, if we look at things like, if we look at ourselves as nature, right? It is like if you keep going, it's like you're betraying yourself instead of that person. Right. And you know the health risks of doing that. But you're also, if you are denying yourself and you're still in relationship with that person, maybe you're denying them of something as well. Because if they want that people pleasing, then, and you can't give it, then someone else will enter their life that maybe is meant to. Or maybe they'll be empowered to take care of themselves and something else will come as a result. So this is the web. Like once you connect in with the soul and the soul leads you physically in the body, it's like there's this golden thread that's woven through your life and other people are woven around you as well.
And so you're saying then from that perspective, if you looked back, I like this idea of a golden thread. Like if you look back, there is an inner knowing you've had your whole life. And what I'm interpreting from what you just said and what I've experienced in my own menopausal journey is that inner knowing starts really screaming at you once you hit those postmenopausal years. And you can no longer put everybody's needs ahead of your own. And you start to really, you know, come into this place of this is who I am. But in that, it's like, I think of it like a chrysalis, you know, the caterpillar coming out of the chrysalis. It's painful. And if you look at the statistics, my audience has heard me say this over and over again, but they're haunting that between 45 and 55 is the most common decade for women to commit suicide. And 65 to 70% of divorces that happen after 50 are initiated by women. When I look at just those two statistics, I look at the neurochemical changes that are happening, and then I hear you talk about this way that the soul wants to express itself. I think really the challenge that we have is that we are not putting language to this massive initiation into the truest version of yourself. And so the more we can talk about it, the more women can experience it, and the more we can all, men and women, make room for it. So talk to me, because I know many of your books have been about initiation. Are there strategies? Are there golden rules for initiation when you know you're at the beginning of an initiation process?
Oh my gosh. Well, the first thing about initiation is that if you say yes to it, the phrase that I say, I text my friends when they're like, oh my God, I'm on the edge. I can feel this initiation happen. I can feel the fire of it. And I say, well, you're going somewhere sacred. And I think this is really important, like that analogy of like going into the chrysalis as well. Like we know that if you were to slice the chrysalis open in the in-between of being the caterpillar to the butterfly, it's just going to be messy gunk and organs. It is It's not pretty. It is not pretty. Birth is not pretty.
Yes.
Okay?
Well
Birth is
said.
not pretty. It's
Yes.
beautiful though.
Yes.
And so I think the first thing is that it's not, a lot of people see transformation, you know, particularly if you're like, I just want to read the transformational books, awakening books. It is not a pretty process. It is a beautiful process though. And it is the most natural thing in the world too.
Yes.
And so I think I think the most important thing is to work out what is your ground, what can you rely on, what is holding you.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when people are faced with initiatory experiences, whether it is a rite of passage like menopause, perimenopause, or if it's something like a heartbreak, deep grief, or end of a career, children leaving home, which often happen at the same time as the hormonal changes as well. We need to, I think so often we find spirituality, we find different communities because we need something to hold us.
Yes.
You know, in a deeper way than before, right?
Yeah.
So we need those deeper roots. So the first thing I would say is, what is holding you? What can you lean back on that isn't necessarily like your existing friendship or your existing whatever? How can you give yourself the depth? Yeah.
Yes.